So do you remember when you were a little kid, that thing that you wanted to be so badly when you grew up? Well, when I was a little girl, every night I would pray that when I woke up, there would be a horse in my backyard. And every morning, I was completely shocked and so disappointed when there was nothing there. Well, life went on, and I grew up, and other than a couple trail rides here and there, driving by horses in a field was about as close as I ever got. Until about 6 years ago, I was given a gift certificate for riding lessons. I was immediately hooked. I started hanging out at the barn and researching on the internet all the time, everything horse-related. At the same time, my kids were getting a little older, and I was starting to feel like I had a lack of purpose in my life. One night, I was out for a walk, listening to music in my headphones, and the song that came on had the words, "God, break my heart for what breaks yours." And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what I need to happen. So I prayed that prayer, "God, break my heart for what breaks yours. Use me to make a difference in the world." Well, about 2 months later, I was doing my usual internet searching for all things horse-related, and I stumbled across a website for a horse rescue. There was a picture of a horse who was completely emaciated with a hopeless look on its face. It was laying down because it was too weak to stand, so they beat it so it would walk across the auction floor just to be sold for a few $100s and then loaded on a trailer and transported to Mexico where it would be slaughtered. That picture changed my life. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't stop sobbing, and I was explaining this to one of my best friends, and I said, "I don't know how to describe it to you. It's like I'm in physical pain. It feels like my heart is broken." Well, as soon as I said those words, I knew that my purpose in life was to rescue horses. Well, I was just a mom living in suburbia. I had taken a few riding lessons. I didn't have any land or money. I didn't even really know anybody who had any horses. So the idea was ridiculous. But I told everybody. I told my friends, my coworkers, waiters, people on the street. I was like, I'm gonna rescue horses one day. I got a lot of crazy looks. Nothing really happened. No horse rescue fell out of the sky. And at one point, I even said, "God, did I get my signals crossed? Am I supposed to rescue dogs? Because that would make a whole lot more sense." But eventually, I met a woman who was building an equestrian facility, and I told her my crazy idea, and she said, "Okay, let's do this." So she and I started the long process of starting a nonprofit organization. And while that was happening, a woman who I had met at the barn told me about a young horse who was in a bad situation and was going to be sent to the auction if someone didn't pick him up in a couple days. And I said, "Well, I'd love to help, but I'm not ready yet." And she said, "Well, just come take a look. I mean, what harm could that do?" Well, we know how that ends. This adorable horse followed me around in a field. I loaded him up on a trailer and brought him back to the barn. And just like that, with no planning, I rescued my first horse. His name is Teddy, and it couldn't be more fitting. He is like a big puppy dog. When he's not chewing on my ponytail, he's taking my phone out of my back pocket. He's the kind of horse that when you drive up, he runs over to the fence so he can see you. So he and I developed a huge bond, and he would kind of set the standard for the kinds of horses that we would rescue. We weren't gonna rescue the old and the sick and the starved and the injured. There was no way that I was ever going to an auction and seeing those traumatizing things. But we would rescue horses like Teddy, who had fallen through the cracks and just needed some TLC and a little training, and then they would find a good home. So that was the plan. So we got our nonprofit status in the spring, and we held our first fundraiser in the fall. And by that time, we had even found a good home for Teddy. And even though the thought of him leaving killed me, I knew that I had to let him go because there were other horses out there who needed us. So we started to think about where we were going to find our next horse. We were on our way. And then it happened. I was out riding with my trainer on a beautiful, clear, crisp fall day. We were laughing and joking. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the wind blew a plastic bag up in the air. Both of our horses spooked and threw us to the ground. And in the split second that I lay there, her horse spun around and ran across me, stepping right on my sternum. It left me with a collapsed lung, multiple broken ribs, a couple of fractured vertebrae, and a severe concussion. I lay on the ground for 30 minutes waiting for the EMTs to arrive, and when they saw the damage, I got a sweet helicopter ride to Fairfax Trauma. As they're rushing me in and in this machine and that machine, all I kept thinking was, I have to get back to the barn before Teddy goes to his new home the following week. It wasn't really until there were 2 doctors standing in the corner and I overheard them say, "We need a chest tuber," that I felt one hot tear roll down my cheek. I mean, we've all seen Grey's Anatomy. Nobody wants a chest tube, right? Well, I made it through that first night, and the next morning, doctors came in and they showed me my x-rays, and they said it was a miracle that I had survived. If the horse had stepped even a fraction of a millimeter in any other direction, I would have been killed. They told me to get a new hobby. A couple days into my hospital stay, I found out that Teddy's adoption had fallen through. So everything just came to a screeching halt. But less than 24 hours after I was released from the hospital, I walked Teddy out to his paddock. And 4 months later, I put on a safety vest, got on his back, and walked around. And I knew that what had happened then was that horse had actually rescued me. Well, that changed everything. I didn't want to avoid the hard things anymore. I wanted to go to the auction. So we planned a trip. And the horse that we rescued there was old, starved, mentally and physically abused, basically used as a slave for humans until he couldn't do his job anymore and he was dumped. To date, Nalani Horse Rescue has rescued 7 horses. And our most recent rescue was from that same auction where I saw that original picture. We rescued the horse that was in such bad shape that he couldn't walk across the auction floor. And we saved him just so that we could humanely euthanize him so that he wouldn't have to endure that horrible trip to slaughter. And that's when I knew I had come full circle. So how does someone like me, who's completely ill-equipped and unqualified, start a horse rescue? Well, all I can say is that God did hear the prayers of that little girl, and even though it took many years, he answered them in a bigger way than I could have ever imagined. Thank you.